Hello, everyone, and welcome to our lecture on Judaism and the African American experience. We can start with going over how elements of Judaism were very appealing to some African Americans. Obviously, there is a common understanding of the atrocities that both groups experienced with the slave trade, with genocide, with the Holocaust, with discrimination, and just the endless hope for liberation out of all of those just horrific experiences. You have the Exodus story in the Torah with the Jews, the children of Israel, leaving Egyptian slavery with the assistance, the direct intervention of God. Appointing the leader of Moses. So you see that in the book of the Exodus, God leading the Hebrews out of their state of slavery. And here, African Americans finally leaving slavery, still having discrimination, though, of course, in American history. As early as the Civil War, there is historical evidence that some African Americans participated in white Jewish synagogues in the southern states, actually. But there definitely is a common connection that's felt among some African Americans with Judaism as a religious tradition. There are four different groups of African American Hebrew or Jewish organizations founded by four different African American men that we can discuss in the context of Judaism and the African American experience. We'll start with the first, Prophet Cherry. He was the first to establish and to institutionalize this appeal to Judaism when he organized the Church of the Living God, the Pillar of Truth for All Nations, first in Chattanooga, Tennessee, and then to Philadelphia, Pennsylvania. He had a vision that he was appointed as a prophet by God and was directed by God to establish a church. He was this organization's final authority. He did have a hierarchy of assistants, though. His vision instructed him to bring African Americans to a proper understanding of themselves as true Jews. God and biblical figures like Adam, Eve, and Jesus were physically black themselves. And it was whites that altered this blackness of biblical figures. African Americans themselves were the true representatives of God's people, and the reading of the Hebrew Bible was mandatory. They had services on on Saturday, which was the Sabbath. There were also gatherings on Wednesdays and Fridays typically. Jesus was not white. He criticized white Christians for that. He also criticized white Jews for thus not accepting the true significance of Jesus Christ. He focused on the Ten Commandments and a strict lifestyle where there was no dancing, no heavy drinking. Obviously, you avoided pork, which is kosher, and no photographs. He did combine the feast of the Passover, a Jewish celebration, with the centrality of Jesus Christ. He died in 1965, and his son Benjamin Cherry has led the organization. We also have the Church of God and Saints of Christ, founded by William Crowdy in Lawrence, Kansas. He had this interesting vision um, where he saw tables with labels of churches on that table, but the table was also covered in filthy vomit. And then he saw a small clean white table with the name of his church. He called his congregations tabernacles, and eventually had 20 different fellowships throughout the state of Kansas. And then New York City established a community with over 1,000 members, and he had missionary outposts in the Caribbean and South Africa. He was referred to as the Black Elijah, and he called African Americans members of the lost tribes of Israel. He did follow the Jewish Sabbath, which begins Friday evening to Saturday evening. Services are led by a rabbi and assisted by a cantor, which you do see in Judaism today, with readings on the Torah, the first 5 books of the Hebrew Jewish Bible: Genesis, Exodus, Leviticus, Numbers, and Deuteronomy. They did celebrate Rosh Hashanah, the Jewish New Year, Yom Kippur, the Day of Atonement, the holiest day of the year in Judaism, and then Passover or Pesach, the celebration of the liberation and deliverance out of Egyptian slavery, and the Exodus event. So we definitely blended Judaism with Christianity, by also asserting that Jesus Christ is the model of ethical conduct, but he never really referred to Jesus as the Messiah, though. And he taught 7 keys about the church, about the forbidding wine, using unleavened bread and water for communion, foot washing as a commandment, like Jesus did on Holy Thursday during the Last Supper, or Jesus celebrating the Passover, the disciples' prayer. You must be breathed upon with a holy kiss, and definitely a focus on the 10 Commandments. And again, there's a network of 32 tabernacles in the US, the Caribbean, South Africa, and England. Next up, we have the Commandment Keepers Congregation of Harlem, founded by Arnold Ford, and then Wentworth Matthew as its main leader. Arnold Ford was affiliated with Marcus Garvey's UNIA movement to get African Americans back to Africa. He studied Hebrew and tried to get African Americans acquainted with Judaism. He is definitely credited with encouraging the practice of Judaism among African Americans in Harlem, but then he disappears. He either moves to Ethiopia or Detroit. The work of this group continues with the leadership of Wentworth Matthew, who helped organize the Harlem community later on. He said blacks are Ethiopian Hebrews, part of the original Hebrew spoken of in the Old Testament, and to reject Christianity as the white man's religion. He says their blackness results from the heritage as the offspring of King Solomon, the third king of a united Israel, following Saul and David. The offspring of King Solomon and the Queen of Sheba, who was black and African. Because of this heritage, the proper religion of African Americans is Judaism, not Christianity. Christianity would be the religion of whites. And Rabbi Wentworth Matthew is the best position to lead the black Jews in the United States. It is taught by this group. He did teach of these 12 principles about creation, following God's laws that God gave to Moses, the dietary restrictions, tithing or donating a tenth. The goal is holiness. Following God's laws will lead to an everlasting life. The freedom from bondage. The most important remembrance is Passover, washing of the feet. Israel will be restored when we're faithful. Black Jews who have died can be raised again. And then the coming of the Messiah to bring about a rule of God. He did open up a rabbinical college as well that focuses on the different languages, biblical studies, and Kabbalah, this mystical Judaism as well. And then lastly, our fourth group is the Hebrew Israelites, which definitely receives the most national and international attention, founded by Ben Carter, who changed his name to Ben Ami, who definitely had a strong belief in the movement of let's get African Americans back to Africa, following his vision that he had from God. And so they went to Liberia, which proved to be difficult to obviously maintain. And so Liberia became a temporary location to prepare them to go back to Israel. And in 1969, some of his members were able to receive housing and jobs and other benefits in Israel. But they had to convert more formally to Judaism itself and not to their own unique African American Jewish beliefs. But he said that we're not really Jewish, we're Hebrew, and that's a difference. And there's a difference between the two. It said that there's maybe as little as 1,000 to as many as 25,000 within his groups. Ami was seen as the group's messiah, bringing them out of the troubled land of the U.S. to the promised land of Israel, and he was given the title Adonai Rabbi, my Lord Adonai, and then Rabbi as master or teacher. His connection to Judaism is connected to Passover, Yom Kippur, the Shabbat or Sabbath, following kosher laws, as well. But he definitely connected it to African styles, with music, and just their way of dress and aesthetic styles too. All right, everyone, have a good day.